Break out the tissues, as things are gonna get messy when the natural world's slipperiest customers dribble all over your screen. We're counting down the top 10 slime balls in the animal kingdom to find out just who has the most uses for their marvelous mucus. We'll discover that as we get nearer our destination, the more we're slip-sliding away when slime balls are taken to the most extreme. Earth is a planet of extremes. Extreme places and extreme animals. But some animals are more extreme than others. Join us as we count down to find the most unusual, the most extraordinary, the most extreme. You may think slime's disgusting, but in Hollywood, it's horrific.
Every one of you watching this screen, look out! Because soon, very soon, the most horrifying monster menace ever conceived will be oozing into this theater.
The Blob may have terrified teenagers in the movies, but in the natural world, there are real-life slime balls that are just as revolting. We're counting down to find the animal that makes the most of its mucus. Humans may think that snot is best kept in a handkerchief, but for these guys, slime is a matter of life and death, especially if you live underwater. Fish use mucus to streamline their bodies and protect their scales. It's made when dehydrated packets of glycoproteins are released from the skin. They absorb water and become clingy mucus. That's why you should always handle a fish gently with wet hands. You don't want to remove the layer of slime and so put the fish at risk of infection by bacteria or fungi. However, there is one fish that's covered in so much mucus it's too hard to handle. Swimming in to number 10 in the countdown is the hagfish. Divers keep their distance because this is one animal you don't want to touch. Its disgusting defense is why it's also called the slime eel or the snotty. Simply annoy a hagfish and in seconds it can turn seawater into a bucket full of goo. When stressed, the hagfish releases dehydrated packets from about 150 slime glands scattered along the length of its body. On contact with water, the packets explode and almost instantly cover the fish in gloop. Some humans have a simpler way of covering their body in slime. Welcome to the annual mud race in the English town of Malden. All you have to do is race across the Blackwater River and back again, in the middle of winter. According to legend, the race began when a regular of the local pub was challenged to serve a meal on the opposite riverbank dressed in a tuxedo. Today, the competitors race to raise money for charity. And while a hot shower will eventually get rid of mud, it's not so easy to shift the hagfish's slimy coating. In addition to mucus, the slime contains very thin, incredibly strong fibers. Any predator attacking the hagfish would soon find itself being strangled by a slimy noose. It's such an effective defense that scientists call the goo the bulletproof vest of the slime world. However, as our countdown continues, we'll meet other slime balls that use their sticky secretions for far more than just defense. Sometimes you can find slime on the walls of a cave, cunningly disguised as 11,000-year-old works of art. Back then, the world was still gripped by an ice age, yet human artists were capable of grinding up pigments and mixing colors with a secret ingredient, their spit. Researchers believe that the ancient artists made a kind of spray paint using charcoal and saliva. Our next contender is another artist found in caves. Only this animal uses spit to create not paintings, but sculptures. Flying in to number 9 in the countdown is the cave swiftlet. These birds nest far from predators high on the roof of a cavern. The trouble is, on these smooth walls, there's nowhere to put a normal nest of twigs or leaves. So instead, the swiftlet builds a white cup using nothing but spit. During the breeding season, the bird's salivary glands enlarge so that it can produce copious amounts of spit. The slime hardens in contact with air, so the bird works fast with its beak, weaving the saliva strand into the mesh of the nest. It's a precarious perch for the bird's precious eggs, so it's no wonder that some species even use a little saliva to glue the eggs to the nest. Even with 2 parents dribbling full-time, it can take more than a month to complete the nest. However, it's worth the effort to keep their chicks far from the reach of predators. But some people in Southeast Asia will go to extraordinary lengths to get into a swiftlet's bed of slime. All it takes is a little careful cleaning to turn a nest of dried spit into a delicacy. The swiftlet's careful creation is the main ingredient in bird's nest soup. It's so highly sought after that 500 grams of this caviar of the East can cost more than $1,000. And that's why in Malaysia, some people are investing in a business that's strictly for the birds. These urban buildings may look deserted, but a speaker system is broadcasting advertisements for a most unusual tenant. This is a hotel for swiftlets. These artificial caves in the middle of the city are becoming very popular. In just 3 years, the number of urban nesting sites has increased from 150 to over 2,000. It's luxury accommodation complete with a stereo system and running water for air conditioning. And at the end of the bird's stay, the landlord gets to collect the nests. It's a whole lot easier to scrape saliva from a ceiling than off the roof of a cave that can be 35 stories above the ground. How would you like to stand on top of a rickety bamboo scaffold just to get your hands on some swiftlet saliva? And while it's much easier to collect slime from animals coming up in the countdown, nobody wants to eat it. While our first 2 slime balls found interesting uses for their mucus, Scientists have discovered that the goop from our next contender works really well when spread on your skin. And later, we'll discover that humans are not the only ones to use slime on their spiky hairstyles. If you wanted to find disgusting, stinky goo, what better place to look than the dump? It's also a strange place to find the next contender in our countdown of extreme slime balls, the toad. It's quite happy in this bacterial brew of filth and decay. That's because its skin is covered in a protective coating of slime. It's hopped into number 8 in the countdown because scientists have discovered that it produces a mucus that contains a cocktail of truly amazing chemicals. And if you know how, it's easy to get a sample of slime. One of the main functions of glands in the skin is to release a mucus that keeps the surface of the amphibian moist and healthy. And some toads can release an awful lot of mucus. When scientists started analyzing the slime, they discovered that toads are walking pharmaceutical companies. The mucus contains a battery of chemical defense systems. Slime from this African clawed toad was found to contain a family of compounds called meganins that are antibiotic, antifungal, antiparasitic, and antiviral. It's a useful chemical to have on your skin when you're a toad that lives in stagnant microbe-filled waters. And now humans can use a synthetic form of the compound as an antibiotic cream that rapidly heals our skin wounds. Our skin may not produce as much mucus as a toad, but we do have our own slimy defenses against bacteria hidden inside our nose. Take a close look and you'll discover that all kinds of germs get stuck in the goo lining the nasal cavity. The fun begins when we try to get the mucus out.
Here, Stinky, blow your nose.
While blowing your nose removes some of the offending goo, most of it runs down the back of your throat. We swallow about 1 liter of snot every day. In 2004, an Australian lung specialist suggested that picking your nose and eating it could be one of the best ways to stay healthy. He claims that because mucus in the nose filters out large amounts of bacteria, when the dry remains of boogers hit the intestine, they work just like a vaccine to strengthen the body's immune system. At least the toad doesn't have to pick its nose to get at its body's chemical defenses. But even this super slime is no match for the versatility of some of the remarkable substances we'll meet later in the countdown. So far, it's been easy to identify the benefits of using mucus to survive. But coming up next, can you guess what slimy animal this model mimics? And later, you'll get the fright of your life when you see an animal that uses snot as a weapon. The next contender in our countdown of extreme slime balls doesn't have to go to the hairdresser to get a spiky coat. It has a very different reason to have goo spread on its head.
That's lovely, thank you very much. Just what I wanted.
There's no need for slimy hair products when you're a hedgehog. Nature's very own punk rocker is number 7 in the countdown because it's found another most unusual use for gooey substances. Occasionally, when it's out hunting for insects, it might come across something that smells really disgusting. But instead of leaving it alone, the hedgehog starts licking it. It will lick and chew and bite, and then perform the most extraordinary contortions to start spreading the spit across its spines with its tongue. It gets so carried away, it works up a real lather of foamy saliva. Nobody's quite sure why the hedgehog carries out this unique self-anointing. Some researchers think that it repels parasites. Others have suggested that since the hedgehog's saliva takes on the smell of the object it bites, by smearing the goo onto its back, the hedgehog can disguise itself with an odor so repulsive it will scare away predators. And this could be why, back in the Middle Ages, people believed that hedgehogs carried apples on their spines and would take them back to the den to eat. It's a nice story, but since hedgehogs are insectivores, it's more likely that the answer lies in slime. Some scientists believe that if a hedgehog wanders into an orchard, it could be overwhelmed by the smell of rotting apples. This could trigger a bout of frenzied self-anointing, and in the middle of its contortions, the hedgehog ends up wearing an apple. Scientists are now confident that fruit's no longer a fashion accessory for hedgehogs, but they're less certain about just why it wants to get lathered in smelly slime in the first place. At least far more is known about just how important goo is for our next slippery contender. Sliding in to number 6 in the countdown is the snail. It's more famous for its slime than its speed, except in Congham, England, home of the World Snail Racing Championships. More than 200 thoroughbred snails are raced over the 33-centimeter course.
Ready, steady, slow.
The organizers know that to have an exciting race, the white tablecloth must be kept nice and damp. They use a watering can to facilitate the best slimy conditions, because without mucus, these snails will go nowhere fast. Even in perfect conditions, it will take a racing snail more than 2 minutes to complete the course, traveling at a breathtaking 0.02 kilometers per hour. When scientists analyzed the way snails move, they discovered that the slime produced by glands on the muscular foot had amazing properties. Although the mucus is about 96% water, it also contains a few special proteins. These molecules make the slime sticky when the snail pushes down on it using just moderate force. But if it pushes harder, the crosslinks in the proteins break apart, and the mucus becomes a slippery liquid. Remove the force, and the proteins bind back together, and the slime returns to being sticky. That's how snails defy gravity. They can use sticky slime to cling upside down. Or if they push a little harder, they get a nice slippery surface so they can move a little faster. Unfortunately, this amazing mucus is expensive to produce. When snails eat, 70% of the energy obtained from the food goes straight into making slime. But for snails and some researchers, it's well worth the effort if you can create one of the world's most extreme all-terrain vehicles. Just ask Brian Chan and Pico Hosoi from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. They've created artificial snail slime. They hope to one day design a vehicle that will mimic the slimy movement of a snail so that it can climb over all kinds of topography. But at the moment, they're testing with a simple flat track and the strangest snail in the world. Robo Snail moves using separate foot panels to mimic the undulating movements of a real snail. By sticking down its rear panels, it can push the rest of its body forward, then anchor the front and pull up the rear. Robo Snail can't move on a dry surface. However, thanks to a little artificial mucus, the researchers hope that, just like a real snail, it will even be able to move upside down. It would be hard to pick a winner in a race between this robot and a real snail, because moving on mucus isn't about speed, but versatility. It's actually not a very efficient way to travel. Sliding along a slime trail is thought to use 10 times more energy than other animals use when they run, swim, or fly. That's why snails have found another use for the goo that's so metabolically expensive to make. If you move at a snail's pace, predators will have no trouble tracking you down. And sometimes a shell just isn't enough defense against a hungry beetle. The snail is number 6 in the countdown because it uses its slime for both movement and defense. Who's gonna eat you when you're covered in ghastly goo? Our last 2 contenders have found that slime can be a really useful form of defense. But would you be willing to cover yourself in goo if it protected you against radiation? And later, we'll discover why some people love this super-sized slime ball. The next contender in our countdown of the most extreme slime balls spends its whole life fishing. For thousands of years, humans have been using fishing nets to catch creatures living underwater. There's another animal that also catches its prey in a fine mesh. However, it doesn't construct a web out of rope or nylon. Its enormous net is made from a great big ball of snot. It may look like a slimy plastic bag floating in the sea, but it's actually the home of a tiny animal called a larvation. This tadpole-like creature has glands on its head that produce masses of mucus, very much like the slime that runs out of your nose. Imagine if we used our to live like a larvation. It would be like an average guy generating enough mucus to weave a snot balloon over 300 meters wide. The house would be built in 2 layers. The outer layer would have a coarse mesh that stops bigger particles of debris from clogging up the fine inner mesh. This traps the smaller particles of food. And when there's too much garbage stuck in the outer layer, we would simply swim away and leave it to sink to the ocean depths. If we were like larvaceans, we'd be building a new mucus balloon at least every 24 hours, which requires an awful lot of snot. While humans may not be able to match the sheer volume of slime produced by a larvation, it's disturbing to learn that our bodies are covered in an awful lot of gooey secretions. One of the slimiest parts of your body is the palm of your hand. An area the size of a postage stamp contains 3,000 sweat glands, each oozing a gooey cocktail of water and more than 350 different chemical compounds. Most people find perspiration disgusting, but there is one animal that's attracted to the ingredients in our slime. Researchers from Yale University have discovered our sweat contains a chemical that's a big turn-on for mosquitoes. Just a whiff of human sweat is enough to trigger a feeding frenzy. So it's not surprising that mosquitoes have a thing for your sweaty socks. Especially since your foot secretions are food for bacteria living in your skin. It's their waste products that make our feet stink. And guess what? These smelly chemicals also draw mosquitoes like a magnet. So, the moral of the story is, in mosquito country, make sure you wear a nice clean pair of socks, and be sure to cover your feet when you're sleeping outdoors. While scientists have no trouble finding mosquitoes for their experiments, it's far more difficult to collect a fragile house of snot. At the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, it takes a skilled pilot to get a remote-operated vehicle anywhere near a larvation without destroying its delicate home. Analysis has shown that when the discarded net falls to the seafloor, there's yet another use for the slime. The balls of snot continue to trap anything in their path. And that's why the strange creations of the larvation are number 5 in the countdown. By effectively doubling the amount of food arriving on the seafloor, they're supporting not just one animal, but hundreds of scavengers at the bottom of the sea. Have you ever wandered through the woods and noticed that somebody's been spitting all over the place? All this foam would be truly disgusting if it had come from a human mouth. But these slimy bubbles have been blown out of a bug's bottom. Meet the Spittle Bug. When it's young, this sap-sucking insect has a soft body that's easily damaged by sun and wind, so it uses slime to protect itself. As it feeds, the bug excretes undigested plant sap and mixes it with an abdominal secretion similar to egg whites. Then, it blows bubbles into the mixture using a special valve on its abdomen. The spittle bug's house of bubbles provides protection against not only the climate. Living inside spit is great camouflage, and the slime contains so many nasty chemicals that it deters most predators. We may not cover our bodies in spit, but we do have sebaceous glands that secrete an oily slime to prevent our skin from drying out. Unfortunately, this coating doesn't give us protection from harmful ultraviolet rays. Before 1936, prolonged exposure to the sun meant we got burnt. And then, along came the founder of the cosmetics firm L'Oreal. French chemist Eugene Schuller is said to have invented the first sunscreen. These solutions contain molecules that either block or absorb ultraviolet rays before they can penetrate our skin. Hidden inside its blob of frothy sunscreen, a young spittle bug is perfectly safe from the sun and predators. But it's only a temporary home, because when it molts into its adult form, its tough exoskeleton provides all the protection it needs. However, as our countdown continues, we'll meet creatures that have to have slime all the time. Home sweet home for our last two contenders meant living in spit or snot. Things don't get any less disgusting when we meet a slimy maggot that goes fishing for flies. And later, how'd you like to have spit that glows in the dark? In our countdown of the world's most extreme slime balls, it's not surprising to find one contender that lives in a dark, damp cave. Since mucus can be as much as 96% water, it makes sense to live somewhere far from the evaporating effects of the sun, especially when you need nice, moist slime to go fishing. Bugs beware, because each one of these delicate strands is actually a gooey fishing line. In the darkness of the cave, it takes a most unusual bait to lure prey into these sticky threads. That's why this maggot has a twinkling light in its bottom. Sliding in to number 3 in the countdown is the New Zealand glowworm. On the roof of the cave, these tiny fly larvae look like stars. The bioluminescence is caused by chemical reactions inside a special organ found at the end of an excretory tube. The hungrier the glowworm, the brighter the light shining from its bottom. This may attract a meal, but it's slime that catches it. Suspended from a vast network of mucus tubes spread across the rock, the glowworm's fishing lines are strong enough to trap even large cockroaches. That's because glowworm slime has a secret ingredient. Some researchers believe those gooey droplets contain chemicals that quickly paralyze its prey. This means that the little maggot can quickly haul in its catch and feed in peace. slime makes eating easier for all kinds of animals. Even before food enters your mouth, your brain triggers glands around your tongue to release saliva. It helps us swallow even the driest foods, which is why we produce up to 1.5 liters of this slippery lubricant every day. And things just get slimier as we head down to the stomach. Glands in the stomach wall produce powerful hydrochloric acid that kills many of the germs that may be swallowed in contaminated food. The only thing that stops the acid destroying our own body is slime. The stomach is coated in a thick layer of alkaline mucus. In the past, it was thought that stress could cause gaps in the protective coat, which in turn created ulcers. But recently, scientists have discovered that 90% of stomach ulcers are actually caused by bacteria. The infection weakens the stomach's mucus lining and makes it more susceptible to the damaging effects of its own digestive juices. The damaging juices of the glowworm are not only found in its stomach, it's turned gooey droplets into a poisonous snare for unsuspecting bugs. However, our next contender goes one step further because its slime shines. On a dark night in the forests of New Zealand, one animal has discovered that producing a bright light is a great way to get out of trouble. Brendan Hicks from the University of Waikato is out looking for a very special slime ball. It shines much brighter than a glowworm, but only when it's in danger. That's why Brendan needs a flashlight, the freshwater limpet called Latia. A cousin of snail, the limpet has a flattened shell and a muscular foot that's so strong, it can cling places where other snails would surely get swept. It moves fast, which is why it's found a way to use mucus as a decoy. Imagine if we could use slime like a limpet when a nocturnal predator was looking for an easy meal. When the going gets tough, a limpet starts spitting. It releases a blob of mucus that glows in the dark and presents a far more attractive target as it drifts away. A predator might lose its appetite if it's got a big, bright bit of goo on its snout. Producing green glowing slime is a great tactic for Latia, because the fish that feed on the limpet are mostly nocturnal. They're using the darkness to hide from even bigger predators. So if they attack a limpet and get a snout covered in green glowing goo, their camouflage is destroyed. Then the hunter could become the hunted, and the waters become safer for the limpet. However, sometimes good things can happen when you get covered in slime. Dogs drool a lot, but their slobber's not totally disgusting. Researchers from the University of California discovered that when mothers licked their puppies, they were actually killing harmful bugs. Dog saliva contains compounds that destroy the bacteria that cause potentially fatal diseases in young mammals. So perhaps getting a sloppy kiss from a dog is not quite as gross as you thought. Limpets also have other surprising uses for their slime, especially when they're on the move. It takes time-lapse photography to appreciate just how much these saltwater limpets can travel when they go grazing on microscopic algae. Just like a snail, mucus lubricates the passage of the limpet's muscular foot. Recently, scientists discovered that the slime also acts as fertilizer. It's rich in nitrogen, which stimulates the growth of the plants it eats. So, everywhere the limpet goes, algae is sure to grow. The slime is also used for navigation. A limpet can follow its gooey trail back to the protection of its very own groove in the rock. The smeared mucus of one species lasts for 40 days, the most enduring slime produced by any animal. However, not even the limpet can compete with the most extreme slime ball in the countdown. We've seen the 9 contenders. They're the slimiest of the slimy. Only one animal is a more extreme mucus-making machine. You can find the most extreme slime ball in the countdown on the campus of the University of California in Santa Cruz. The students love the animal at number 1 in the countdown, Sammy the Banana Slug. But Sammy the Slug wasn't always this popular. The story goes that despite being the unofficial mascot of UCSC for many years, the university management decided they needed something more dignified than a slimy slug to represent their university. One chancellor thought that the sea lions living on the coast would be more appropriate, and even had a picture of the mammal painted on the basketball court. The students ignored it completely, because there will only ever be one mascot at UCSC, and it's the animal that's number 1 in our countdown of extreme slime balls. It lives in the forests of America's west coast, and not surprisingly, it's big, yellow, and incredibly slimy. Alice Harper is a naturalist who spent years in these woods observing the banana slug's more unusual habits.
The banana slug has a very unique ability to make a slime cord. Say the banana slug has crawled up a tree to eat some of the lichen growing on the tree, and suddenly the sun comes out and it has to get down where it's protected or it'll dry up and die. So it connects a bunch of slime from a gland in its tail to the tree limb and starts going head first in midair until it's long enough and it reaches the ground and it's gotten to safety quicker than it could have by crawling down the tree.
Of course, the animal at number 1 in the countdown has many more uses for slime than just a slippery bungee cord. Just like a snail, it secretes copious amounts of mucus to act both as a lubricant and a glue to climb over vertical surfaces. And, like a limpet, the banana slug leaves behind a gooey trail wherever it travels. When it's in the mood for love, it will smear pheromones into its slimy track as a chemical come hither for a potential partner. The only problem with being completely covered in sticky slime is that all the debris in the forest will eventually end up stuck on your body. That's why the banana slug also uses slime as a shower. It will move all the goo on its body back towards the tail until there's a huge hunk of mucky mucus clinging to its backside. Then it just turns around and eats the lot. But not all animals can cope with slug slime. Its bright color is a warning that predators ignore at their peril. When attacked, banana slugs produce a super thick slime. Even dogs have been seen gagging on its goo. This salamander learnt the hard way to stay clear of banana slugs. Their slime contains toxic chemicals and sticks jaws together like super glue. From moving to mating or cleaning and escaping, the super slime of the banana slug does it all. So it's not surprising that this little slime ball has finally gained the recognition it deserves at the University of California, Santa Cruz. Sammy the Slug may be a little cuddlier than his namesake, but there's no doubt that when it comes to making mucus, the banana slug really is the most extreme.